The Canadian Blood Services Agency openly discriminates against homosexuals. Here in Canada, the Canadian Blood Services Agency, or the CBSA, openly discriminates against homosexual men. It refuses to accept blood or plasma donations from, quote, men who have had sex with other men, end quote. The Canadian Blood Services Agency is, in our age of political correctness, far too cowardly to actually call them homosexuals. The Canadian Blood Services Agency's own documentation states the reason for this discrimination. The CBSA instituted the policy to ban blood donations from gay men in 1983 because men who have had sex with other men are at greater risk for HIV/AIDS infection than other people. In Canada, you cannot donate blood if you have used a needle to inject illegal drugs into yourself, you have taken money or drugs for sex since 1977, or you are a male who has had sex with another male since 1977. The Canadian Blood Services Agency makes no bones about the fact that gay men are more likely to contract AIDS than other segments of society. Clearly, the government can discriminate where mere citizens cannot. While it's perfectly legal and acceptable for the Canadian Blood Services Agency to discriminate against homosexual men, any mere citizen writing the very same facts about homosexual men and their susceptibility to the AIDS virus as the CBSA does is subject to intense legal sanctions. But what if you didn't actually write the discriminating document? That doesn't matter. For hosting a website where a single document was posted that only 7 Canadians viewed, in 2004 Marc Lemire was prosecuted under Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act for promoting hatred on the internet against an identifiable group. In 1996, Marc Lemire created a website, freedomsite.org. On that site he posted a transcript of a show by Kevin Strom called AIDS Secrets. In that show, Strom said that to avoid contracting the AIDS virus, a person should avoid contact with the 3 highest risk groups: intravenous drug users, those from the Third World, and homosexuals. Marc Lemire did not know Kevin Strom. They had never met. When the AIDS Secrets article was submitted to Marc Lemire, he published it under the controversial columnists section of his website. Lemire did not claim to support the document, nor did he voice any support for it. Sometime prior to January 1, 2004, Marc Lemire permanently removed the forum from freedomsite.org. He removed the website's forum long before he even knew about Richard Warman's human rights complaint against him. Marc Lemire, upon learning of the complaint about the AIDS Secrets article written by Kevin Strom, deleted the offending document in a good faith effort to settle the Human Rights Act complaint. Barbara Kalaska, Marc Lemire's lawyer, wrote the Human Rights Commission on April 23, 2004 and informed them Lemire's message board was permanently removed as of January 1, 2004, and that Marc Lemire had voluntarily removed the one remaining article, AIDS Secrets, all in the interests of settling the complaint. Barbara Kalaska suggested a settlement could now be reached between the parties, given that all matters complained of were no longer on the internet. Prosecution or persecution. Marc Lemire removed every document and every article that Richard Warman complained about by, at the very latest, April 23, 2004. Despite those facts, serial complainant Richard Warman refused any and all attempts at mediation, preferring instead to continue his prosecution of Marc Lemire under Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. Despite Marc Lemire's voluntary removal of all offending documents from his website, both the Canadian Human Rights Commission and the complainant, Richard Warman, declined all of Lemire's requests for mediation. They simply were not interested in ending their prosecution of this case unless and until Marc Lemire was utterly destroyed. The stated aims of the Canadian Human Rights Act are remedial, not punitive. The object of the Act is to correct discriminatory behavior, not punish. Is it remedial to refuse any and all attempts at mediation? Is it remedial to refuse to communicate with the subject of a Human Rights Act complaint? Is it remedial to continue prosecuting a man 8 years after all offending documents were removed from the internet? No, it is not. Support Marc Lemire's defense of our right to freedom of speech. If you despise government bodies telling you what you can and cannot say on the internet, if you despise law written for telephone answering machines being applied to all of your internet communications on any internet platform, if you believe Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act violates your constitutional right to freedom of speech, then please contribute generously to Marc Lemire's Free Speech Legal Defense Fund so he can continue his appeal and constitutional challenge of Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. Mail your generous donation in defense of freedom of speech, payable to Marc Lemire, Attention Free Speech Legal Defense Fund, 762 Upper James Street, Suite 384, Hamilton, Ontario, L9C 3A2. Or you can donate online by visiting stopsection13.com/support.html. Thank you for your generous support in defense of freedom of speech in Canada. Together, we can stop internet censorship.